I just want to take a moment to thank you for sharing that, Courtney, because I think the entire room had a we've been there moment, and I think that's, we're out of time, so I want to open it up to the audience to ask questions, but I just want to thank you for sharing that. I think that's something that we don't talk about online enough, and I think we see a lot of Instagram accounts that share the unicorn flatline number, and that's great, and it's wonderful when that happens, but I think it's a lot more realistic to have the moments where we're not telling doctors something that we don't feel great about. I've been there. Just thank you for sharing that. That was very helpful. I want to open it up to all of you. I see a hand. Stand up, project. Let's go.
Okay, so first, Courtney, I want to say thank you for saying that, because we know that we feel guilty when we go to the doctor's office and get prepared for that A1C, but to hear it coming from a parent actually saying that they don't want to, sorry, I took a frozen this morning, that they don't want to take their child to an appointment because they don't want to be reprimanded because of the way that they, quote unquote, the doctor believes that you didn't take care of your son, was eye-opening, because we never hear that in the community. We always hear, well, I teach my son or my kid how to do X, Y, Z and how to excel, but to hear those stories and those voices, thank you so much. That's all I have to say. Oh, and then I have something for you as well. So, I know people are going to kill me because I totally agree with you. I think that when we live in a society, when people care more about what their cell phones can do and cannot do, and I take advantage of the healthcare system, I think that's a real problem, but that's something totally separate. You had mentioned about the basal settings. I think that sometimes we assume that we give people technology, but we don't give them the education and they empower them to use the technology in the way that's intended to do. Because I'm 37 years old, so I shouldn't have to depend on my endocrinologist to tell me how to fix my setting. So like I said, that's a totally different conversation. But I think that as we giving people technology, we also need to make sure that they understand how to really use that technology to the best in the way that's intended to be used.
Well, that's your endocrinologist's fault for not teaching. No, that's what it is. And also you have the resource of always calling the company. Whoever they come in and sometimes they do like one-on-one. It's also that, and just to remind you for your appointments, if your doctor is in a health system that has an electronic medical record, I hate it and love it. I hate it because it's a lot of typing and it gives me carpal tunnel, but it allows you to communicate with your doctor. You might not get a response overnight because it's hard, but at least you get to send your settings. And I've been doing that. Like, if you tell your doctor exactly, if your doctor cares, right? So that's what you first have to establish. Do I have a relationship with this person? If they care, I have patients that cannot make it every 3 months because of work, because they have a bunch of other appointments that need to attend to. So maybe what you can do is upload your finger sticks, like the glucose levels or the log, and your doctor can adjust it through that. Like, I mean, well, here's the thing though. I'm not saying you specifically, I'm saying in general for anyone. Ask your doctor, can we do that? If I have to miss an appointment for whatever, because things happen, I know it happens. Uploading your report, and maybe your doctor can interpret the report and give you suggestions on how to make changes.
But that's also why I said I have an advantage, because I know how to change his basal. I changed his basal. I know how, like, I uploaded all of that. But that, again, puts me at an advantage. And you're right, like, it's the endocrinologist's responsibility to educate, because not everyone is going to take the initiative and like, okay, let me learn something else other than what my doctor is saying, and I do that. So that's the point I was making. Like, you know, it's the doctors, that relationship that's there. So I agree 100%. And you're welcome.
I just also want to add, like, I live in a rural area outside of New York, and I think it's important to note that, like, I drive 2.5 hours to go to my endocrinologist appointment because my endocrinologist upstate still doesn't believe I have type 1. It's a whole thing. But I think it's important to acknowledge that not everybody has access to an endocrinologist that knows something. And so there are so many great support. I'm sure, I mean, we all know Beyond Type 1, but I think that, and Ali and I were talking about this beforehand, Facebook is full of these groups. If you feel like you're not getting what you need from your endocrinologist, try somebody else. I've learned more from the Type 1 athletes group on Facebook. I'm not an athlete, by the way, but it's a great support group of people who constantly test, who upload their Dexcom numbers, who upload everything, and they constantly test. And I have learned more about my body in the past 4 years from that Facebook group than I've ever learned from my doctors, even though I now have a good one. So I think that in tandem with a great doctor is an important thing to take advantage of. Does anyone have another question before we start? I'm just going to hurry on with that person in a striped shirt.
Hi.
My question is for Dr. Vieira. I actually work in social services, and I know that you touched on motivational interviewing. Motivational interviewing is great with rolling with resistance. So I guess my question is that something that practitioners are openly available to maybe partake in? I actually was in a training yesterday for a master class, and I found it really helpful when I was speaking to my clients, and it helps them kind of like reflect on their own feelings on like why they should change, and it's been proven to work on like long-lasting change for the future.
You're asking if doctors are being trained
Or if they're open to being trained.
I think, everything, I guess, again, we all have so many hats. Maybe that's something that I can bring up. The reason why I learned, I'll be honest, I did not learn that in medical school, and I did not learn that up until very recently. I read about motivational interview, and I would leave that up to my CVE or my social workers to do. But then after a while, it's like, okay, they can't get an appointment with the CVE, or they can't get an appointment with the social worker, I guess I have to do it. So I said, okay, I took it upon myself to learn it. The reason why I learned motivational interviewing is because I do obesity medicine. So aside from being endocrine, I'm a specialist in obesity medicine, and that's something that's very useful in helping people identify the barriers, preventing them to adhere to a lifestyle that will be conducive to healthy eating. That's how I learned it. Doctors are not resistant to it, but I think the better question is, it should actually be introduced in the medical school curriculum and in residency, and it's not being done. Same thing as nutrition is not being introduced into the curriculum. So that's something very good. I guess now we're learning about it. Maybe in a couple of years we can raise awareness about it. But you're absolutely right. I think motivational interview is just a good way of like that, like try to get the person to adhere to a change.
I agree, thank you.
Yeah, I'm curious. Hi. So I think I have appreciated everything that everyone has said, but I do feel like I haven't heard from those with the experience of living with diabetes as much, and so I'm curious if I could just maybe hear 3 things about what being in this space means to you right now, and also maybe I think something that has really brought us all together is online platforms. I know that's kind of the first place that, as a type 1 diabetic and a type 1 diabetic of color, where I actually saw folks that looked like me that were kind of coming out of the woodwork. And so I'm kind of, I guess it's a 2-part question, but what brought you here? What's kind of the importance of being in this space? And then second of all, kind of how are you utilizing online platforms?
I'd say for me, I've always been really inclined to do something with my life. Being an immigrant, super ambitious and crazy. Is like when you get diagnosed, it's like you can't just put a wall on it. Like, oh, I'm still gonna do this. Obviously that's cool, but for me, I've always been really energetic towards being super healthy and talking about burnout a lot. That's been huge for me. And the second part of that question is, when we're talking about people of color, it's definitely a minority with type 1. Type 1 in general is a minority. You don't go around and see a pump, go, oh my God, someone has a pump, And then on top of it, they're African American, or they're Arab, they're Latino. So when I first got diagnosed, I was looking up diabetic bodybuilders or, artists with diabetes, and it's like 0. You'll find a commercial in Spanish or like something about type 2. It's really underspoken. That's been my big push for us to be in the media. I know this sounds really vague, but if you know the Instagram Explore page where all the popular pages are at, my vision is like one day we have to be there where like the most funniest memes are there, like hip hop. So what happens is people know who we are and the stigma's gone, and then we all as a community can like stand again and say, okay, here's where we should go towards a cure, or here's where we should go as a community. That's the big thing for me.
So I'm not going to give my typical answer because I feel like a lot of you guys are already familiar with my story and why I wanted to create my platform, Just a Little Sugar. But I will say that in sitting here today and just listening to the conversations around stigmas and empowering people, etc., I realized that I, as well, I'm pretty sure most of us on this panel, we are a very privileged group, and that we are educated, we feel comfortable and okay with advocating and speaking up for ourselves and saying to doctors what I need. And I think for a lot of people who are coming from communities of color, that is not something that they're accustomed to doing, especially in a white world. It could be cultural reasons where, we're taught to listen. A doctor is the expert. We just receive their information. We don't necessarily push back. We don't necessarily feel open in sharing our opinion. And so when I think about why I wanted to create this space or what this space today means for me, I think it's so important because at the end of the day, I want to empower other people to be able to do what I am doing today. It shouldn't be the 1, 2, 3, 4 same people of color you are always calling on to speak about the diabetes experience.
Yes.
There should be more people who are openly doing this. And so my hope is to get those people who might feel a little bit timid, might have had a bad experience with a medical professional and want to tap out of diabetes, to say, you know what, like, she's doing it, I can do it too. He's doing it, I can do it too. And so that's what this space means. And then when I think about the online community and social media, again, I don't necessarily know what it is. I know that with some platforms, like, people self-select and you decide to share your pictures, your stories, etc. And I don't know if it's that we are not aware that these platforms exist, or because we don't see enough people who look like us, we don't feel comfortable in presenting ourselves to these platforms. So that's always something that I've been mindful of, which is why I try to create a strong social media presence so that I can say, like, hey, yes, be a Black woman or a Black man or a Latina, and use that T1D hashtag, use that Live Beyond hashtag, right? So that these platforms and whoever's involved with them can see that you in fact exist. And even if you don't feel necessarily comfortable reaching out to them, maybe they'll reach out to you and say, hey, we want to share your story, or we want to highlight you in some way. So I hope that answers some of your question.
So I want to give Chase a visual to help him understand what the question is. So I want you to picture that this is your classroom, right? And if I ask everybody in your classroom with you sitting in there, and you guys answer honestly, can you raise your hand if you are living with type 1 diabetes? High, really high. Now, think about your classroom now, and think about if this was your classroom. How does that feel, the difference? So how does it feel seeing all of those hands raised? People who are living with diabetes just like you. Imagine if this was your classroom. These are all of the people in your classroom, and you all have diabetes. How would you feel?
I would kind of get excited because there's also other people like me in my classroom that know how it feels to live with type 1 diabetes.
We're all gonna try not to cry. We're out of time. Does anyone have one last question? Yeah, go ahead.
So my question is, as a person of color living with type 1 diabetes, we all know that right now, we kind of, in terms of like race relations in America, where the atmosphere is kind of dicey. So when you do have like, we do have events that highlights people of color living with type 1 diabetes, and then you have a lot of backlash, like a lot of people saying, why are you being divisive? Just shining negativity into the work that we're trying to do. I just wanted to know what any of you guys feel is a way to best handle situations like that, because I'm not going anywhere anytime soon.
I'd say that's really hard because one of my challenges is when I put myself out to media, I'm like, oh, they're gonna hate me because I'm aggressive here, or oh, that's unacceptable. You can't say that, because what people have to realize is it's not gonna be, sunshine. We all know that. Diabetes is not, being a strong advocate, you're gonna have to go through people that say, oh, I don't like you, or oh. So I don't have the complete answer because I'm still struggling with that, but I think it's okay for a couple people to hate us, but to get through the people that really care and want to stand up and say something. So I guess be you.
Grace, how do you handle when these situations arise?
I just want to say, as an ally, and for all of the white people in the room. It is absolutely our job to talk to the other really shitty white people who are doing a poor job at we've all talked about, like, I got some comments on my feed about this event saying, why do you have to be divisive? Like, why can't everyone be there? I have plenty of space. I want to hold this mic as little as humanly possible. I have plenty of space. We don't need any more space. There's tons of visibility for white people with type 1. So if somebody is saying that around you, tell them why that is wrong. It is our job as white people to deal with our people. So please speak up if you see that happening. Do not shy away from it. Use your DMs, talk to people, set them straight, because it is not everybody else's job in this room to do that. There's enough exhausting work being done. So please do that work.
And this event was open to anyone who wanted to come and be
Thank
part of
you.
the conversation.
Right.
And I think, some of that, any of that feedback is exactly why we need to have these events and these conversations. And we just need to keep having them. I know Beyond Type 1 is very interested in amplifying messaging and being a microphone, and we're not afraid to say anything, as some of you've probably seen we want to talk about the things that other people shy away from, because we want to be authentic and real.
Exactly, and that's what I was going to say, right? So the assumption is that when we have events like this, we are excluding white people. A celebration where people of color are coming out to support this community does not mean that you are not welcome here. In fact, you are. And in fact, we need you to be here, because otherwise we're just preaching to the choir. So the white people who are here are allies and already understand why this work of inclusion and diversity and having many stories is so important. It's the people who are like, why do I need that event, or why can't I come, who actually need to be in this space and understand that no, just because it's for, not even for people of color, but just because we're supporting people of color, that doesn't mean that there's not space for you here as well. You need to be a part of this conversation.
And organizations too.
Yes.
Pushing back and standing up and not removing things from their websites.
But wait, can I just, from a parent perspective, and thinking about events and organizations, Chase shared that going to diabetes camp is so much fun to him. My brother volunteered at the diabetes camp. If we took my brother out of the equation, there's no one adult that looks like him that would be present. When we go to Call to Congress, there are like a handful of families, black and brown families, who are there, but when there are presentations that are being done, when there's panels that are being done in preparation for it, no one looks like us on those panels. And this last year, I made a comment at the Call to Congress in front of all of the advocates, and afterwards everyone was like, oh my God, that was so amazing, you speak so well, blah, blah, blah. And no, that's not a compliment. So it's, important for me, and it was my responsibility to reach out to those in charge, those at the table in those organizations, and ask, and not even to demand, but to ask. I'm curious as to why there wasn't more representation for people who look like my son in leadership positions, people who are actually handling it. So coming from a parent perspective, but also, as an advocate for yourself, it's also about speaking up. And while you shouldn't always have to carry that, because it is important for us to have allies, but do it. And it's gonna piss some people off. It's gonna make them mad. And even in your jobs of employment, your employment, speaking up as well. So just always speaking up. I don't care whose toes you're stepping on, who's upset, who's angry. It doesn't matter. Your voice matters. Your life matters. That doesn't mean that others don't.
We're way over our time, but this was really important to hear all of you. Please join me in thanking everyone on this panel. I was going to say, please stay, ask everybody questions, keep this conversation going. Ariel, do you want to say anything else before?
I really just want to say thank you again for everyone who showed up today, my people of color who showed why this space is so important, for the panelists who talked about the importance of being aware psychosocially and being aware of different structural barriers and having an understanding of that, being culturally competent and knowing how to speak to the communities that you're serving. To my mama over here who is so transparent about her own experience in terms of trying to best service her son. Vivian for giving us the perspective of Africa and pushing back against paternalistic ideologies. And Ali, like you really held it down. I know you were super nervous. So everyone, I am so grateful for each and every one of you. And again, it really is my hope that if you are one of those people who came here today thinking, man, like, what she's doing is so amazing, or this is so amazing, think about how you yourself can do something like this as well. Like, I don't want to carry this burden alone. I would love to have other people who are just as vocal as me and who feel just as comfortable and confident in creating spaces like these. And to our allies, thank you again for giving us this space and opportunity to really share our stories. And I trust that each of you will go back into your own spaces and push the folks who look like you to really take seriously the concerns of communities of color. So thank you again to everyone for being here.
Thank you, everyone. We've got a raffle to draw. We couldn't do that on Facebook Live. Let me make sure that's ended. But thank you for being here. And again, I hope this is the first of many conversations. As we said, we at Beyond Type 1 want to make sure we are a voice and an amplifier. If you haven't downloaded the app or you haven't been on our Instagram wall, please help us showcase people of color. We need people to send in their Instagram submissions, and so that we can help share your story, so that we can help people like Chase look on that wall of Instagrams and see someone that looks like him, or any of you. So please help us. We're around, we're very accessible, we're a high-touch organization, and we're here to help and serve the community. So help us help you. Thank you again to all our panelists, and especially to our friends from Tandem who are in the room as part of the sponsors of this event. We love to see our corporate partners really understand that this is an important conversation. So thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
You're here with me. So you were Daniel? I am. Oh my God.